What if the Jesus most of us have been taught to revere from a distance was never meant to be a distant figure at all? What if he came to wake you up? What if the most dangerous thing he ever said, the words that could dismantle systems of fear and dependence, were quiet, intimate, and kept out of the public liturgy for a reason? The truth Jesus spoke in private, the thing the institutional church, in many of its forms, never wanted to make easy to find, is this: he handed down a way to awaken the divine within you, not a roadmap to make you dependent on an external authority. I remember the moment I first felt the mismatch. I was sitting in a pew, not as a radical or a rebel, just another person trying to belong. The sermon drifted into formulas: do this, believe that, follow this leader. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't expected. A quiet, impossible question rose up. What if you're not broken? Not in need of fixing by someone else, not fundamentally lacking, but asleep in a deep, recoverable way? That question changed everything for me. It began a decade, then two, of reading in corners, tracking sayings, learning to listen for patterns. I read the canonical Gospels again, but I also followed the faint trails of the less public texts, fragments, sayings attributed to Mary, short collections like the Gospel of Thomas that some scholars treat as early teachings emphasizing direct knowledge. I learned to notice the repetition, certain phrases, certain turns of speech, as if there were 3 core keys repeated like a code. If that sounds dangerous, good, that's part of the point. The awakening is meant to be dangerous to systems built on obedience without inner freedom. I'm not here to tear down people's faith or to tell you to flee every church building. I'm here because I believe you are given commands to remember yourself, not to be small forever. The question that started my path, what if you're not broken, becomes an invitation I want to hand to you now. Long before I found the name activation codes, I kept noticing the same handful of phrases in Jesus' words. They turn up in places we think we already understand, but when you let them land as instructions rather than doctrine, they rearrange your inner landscape. Consider these lines as literal keys, not merely metaphors. The kingdom of God is within you, Luke 17:21. You are the light of the world, Matthew 5:14. Before Abraham was, I am, John 8:58. And the promise that whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, John 14:12. Taken together, these sayings sketch a map, an inner kingdom that can be entered now, an identity that is luminous and active, a naming of self that precedes time, and a call to human beings to embody an expanding power. Now, some history is needed because context matters. There was a turning point in how Christianity presented itself to the world. After Constantine's conversion in the early 4th century, the movement that had often been marginal and mystical began to interface with empire. In 325 CE, the council, commonly called Nicaea, gathered bishops and clerics to argue theology and structure. I say commonly called because how people name things is part of how they hold power. Some historians argue that this was a pragmatic moment when diverse local practices were folded into a more uniform body. Other scholars caution against imagining a single malicious conspiracy. One reading is that as a religion moved from persecuted sect to state-supported institution, certain practical decisions were made to make belief governable. As that happened, teachings that emphasized direct inner experience and individual authority tended to be quieted, marginalized, or categorized as mystical rather than orthodox. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary were sidelined in many places, whether by design or by the forces of time and chance. Many voices were muted. That is contested history, and I don't present it as incontrovertible fact, but as one interpretive lens that helps explain why some of Jesus's most incendiary, inner-directed sayings have lived at the margins. If the institutional project wanted a stable, orderly body, the whispering call to individual awakening would be inconvenient. Revolutions are difficult to govern. So whether through institutional preference or historical happenstance, a lot of the radical interior teaching that open-source mystics insisted upon stopped taking center stage in the official architecture of religious life. That doesn't make the institution evil. It made it functional in ways that helped cultures settle and survive. But for you, for those of us who feel a hunger that polite religion doesn't satisfy, it's important to notice what's been relegated to the margins.
Here's the claim I want you to hold as we move forward. Some of Jesus' most private, intimate teachings survived. They survived less as formal doctrine and more as an underground stream of practice and phrase, repeated in small circles, in aphorisms, in sayings that slip between parables. I call them codes because they function like activating phrases. When you say them with attention and intention, when you feel them rather than merely repeat them, they open something in your nervous system and in your orientation to life. 3 of these codes recur again and again. I will name them, anchor each one to a biblical text, and give you a small practice you can try. None of this is magic guaranteed to remake your life overnight. Think of it as a spiritual technology handed down in language. The first code is the I am code. Jesus used I am in a way that startled his listeners. In John 8:58, he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." That phrase, in the cultural context of his hearers, echoes a name of God. It announces presence as prior to chronology.
Read that line as an identity clue, rather than a metaphysical jigsaw piece to argue over. The deeper move here is that the self who speaks I am points to a ground of being that is present now. In mystical terms, I am functions as a recognition. It is not a boast of ego. It is an invitation to locate your sense of being in the presence that precedes circumstance. Practically, the I am code is about alignment. Jesus models a self-identification that is declarative and anchored in being. A short practice. When you wake, put your hand over your chest and say, slowly and with attention, I am. Pause. Let the breath answer. Then say a short, truthful completion. Not an extravagant claim, but a recognition you can live into. I am alive. I am present. I am called. This is not a mantra to conjure wealth or guarantee miracles. It is a device to reorient your attention from scarcity to being. When you repeat I am and allow the sentence to land in the felt body, something moves. A tiny synaptic loop reconnects identity to presence, and habitual narratives about lack lose some of their purchase. The second code is the kingdom within code. Jesus tells his listeners in Luke 17:21, "The kingdom of God is within you." The common homiletic reading places the kingdom somewhere in the future, a reward to be obtained. That is one reading. Another reading, the one I'm inviting you to try, is literal. The kingdom Jesus speaks of is a present reality of consciousness, an inner residence of the divine life. It is not a postcard for later. It is a door you can step through now. This idea is reinforced by the way Jesus teaches through parable. Parables bypass rote cognition. They create images that wake the heart. The parable of the mustard seed, the yeast and dough, the treasure hidden in a field. They point to small inner realities that grow into outer consequences. If the kingdom is within, then the work Jesus asks of us is first interior, attention, courage, remembering. A short practice for the kingdom within. Place your palm over your heart. Breathe slowly in for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. With each exhale, imagine your attention dropping below your chest into the center of being. Say silently, here. Repeat 3 times. This is not a ritual to replace prayer or belief. It's an embodiment exercise to help you locate the inner domain Jesus kept pointing toward. Over time, this kind of attention makes you less reactive and more anchored. The result is not a supernatural guarantee. It's a trained capacity to sense the inner promptings that orient you toward love and purpose. The third code is the greater works code. In John 14:12, Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will